On our anniversary, my wife confessed to cheating because of my low income. I experienced betrayal. Hi, my name is Tom, I'm 31 years old, and I guess you could say this is the story of how I found out that my marriage wasn't what I thought it was. I never imagined that something like this could happen to me, especially on the day that was supposed to mark another year of our life together. But here I am, trying to make sense of it all. I've been married to Sarah for 6 years. She's 29, and we met back when I was still in college, studying to be a teacher. At the time, I felt like the luckiest guy in the world. Sarah was stunning, blonde hair, blue eyes, always smiling. She had this energy that made me feel like I could conquer anything as long as she was by my side. And for a while, things were good. We got married, bought a small house just outside of Cleveland, and I started teaching high school English. It wasn't the most glamorous job, but I loved it. And I thought Sarah was happy too. I knew from the start that I wasn't going to make 6 figures as a teacher. That was never why I got into education. But for the first few years of our marriage, it seemed like we were doing fine. Sure, we weren't taking luxury vacations or buying expensive cars, but we had a good life. At least I thought we did. Then, about 2 years ago, things started to change. Sarah started making comments about how we couldn't afford certain things. It wasn't anything major at first, just little remarks about how her friends were going on trips to Hawaii or buying new designer bags. I tried not to let it get to me. I knew we weren't in the same financial league as some of her friends, but I thought we had different values. I thought Sarah understood that I was doing the best I could, and that what we had was enough. But as time went on, those comments became more frequent. She'd drop little hints about how our house wasn't as big as she'd like or how we couldn't go out to nice restaurants as often as she wanted. I tried to make up for it in other ways, planning cozy nights in, cooking her favorite meals, writing her little notes to remind her how much I loved her. But it didn't seem to matter. The distance between us grew, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. Fast forward to this year, our anniversary. I was really trying to make it special. We didn't have a lot of extra cash, so I planned a low-key evening at home. I cooked a nice dinner, got some candles, and even bought a bottle of her favorite wine. I wasn't expecting anything extravagant in return, just some time together, you know? But as soon as Sarah walked through the door that night, I could tell something was off. She barely looked at me as she put her purse down and kicked off her shoes. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe she'd had a rough day at work. But when she sat down at the table and looked at the dinner I'd spent hours preparing, she didn't smile. She didn't even thank me. Instead, she sighed and said, "Tom, we need to talk." My heart sank. You know that feeling when you just know something bad is about to happen? That's what hit me right then. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to stay calm. My mind was racing, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I could tell this wasn't just about her being tired or stressed. She took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought maybe she was going to tell me she wanted a divorce. But what came out of her mouth was somehow worse. "I've been seeing someone else," she said quietly, her eyes not meeting mine. It felt like the ground had just disappeared beneath me. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was stare at her, waiting for her to say something, anything, that would make this make sense. "I didn't want to tell you like this," she continued, "but it's been going on for a while now, and I can't keep living this lie." I finally found my voice, though it came out shaky. "But why would you do this?" She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. "Tom, I'm not happy. I haven't been happy for a long time." "What does that even mean?" I demanded, the shock quickly turning to anger. "We've been married for 6 years, Sarah. You didn't think to tell me that you were unhappy before cheating on me?" "I tried," she said defensively. "But every time I brought up money, you just brush it off or tell me we'd figure it out. I'm tired of figuring it out. I'm tired of struggling. I'm tired of not having the life I want." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So, this is about money?" I asked, my voice rising. "You cheated on me because I don't make enough money?" She winced at my words, but she didn't deny it. "It's not just the money," she said, her voice quieter now. "But yeah, that's part of it. I want more than what we have, Tom. I want to travel, I want to go out to nice places, I want to live in a bigger house. And you just don't seem to care about any of that." I felt like I was going to be sick. "I've been working my ass off to provide for us," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "I've been doing everything I can, and you're telling me it's not enough?" She didn't say anything, just sat there, looking at the table like she couldn't even bear to face me. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't just confessing because she felt guilty. She was confessing because she was done. Done with me. Done with our life together. And there was nothing I could do to change that. I sat there, stunned, trying to process what Sarah had just told me. It felt like everything I thought I knew about my life had crumbled in a matter of minutes. My wife, the woman I'd shared my life with for the past 6 years, had cheated on me. Not because she didn't love me anymore, but because she wanted a lifestyle I couldn't give her. How the hell was I supposed to respond to that? For a few minutes, we both sat in silence. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, and it felt like the weight of her confession was suffocating the air in the room. Finally, I broke the silence. "Who is he?" Sarah looked up at me, her expression almost apologetic. Almost. "Does it matter?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Does it matter?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've been cheating on me and you're asking if it matters who the guy is?" "Yes, Sarah, it matters." She let out a long breath and ran a hand through her hair, clearly uncomfortable. "His name is Jake. He works in finance?" Of course, I thought bitterly. A finance guy. Probably making 6 figures, living in a fancy apartment downtown, driving a car that costs more than our entire house. I could see how that would be appealing to her. I wasn't naive. I knew money could be a seductive thing, but I never imagined it would be enough to tear apart our marriage. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice strained. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "About 6 months, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 months. She'd been living a double life for 6 months, pretending everything was fine while sneaking around behind my back. I couldn't believe it. I felt like a complete idiot for not seeing the signs sooner. "How could you do this to me?" I asked, my voice breaking as the reality of the situation hit me. "I thought we were in this together, Sarah. I thought we were building a life together." She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I didn't plan for this to happen, Tom. It just did. Jake made me feel things I haven't felt in a long time. Things I couldn't make you feel," I shot back bitterly. She didn't deny it. That hurt more than I expected. I had always prided myself on being a good husband. Maybe not the richest, but someone who was loving, supportive, and tried to be there for his wife. But hearing her admit, even indirectly, that I wasn't enough, it cut deep. "So what now?" I asked after a few moments of silence. "Are you leaving me for him?" Sarah looked torn, like she hadn't quite made up her mind yet. "I don't know," she said softly. "Jake, he's great, but I don't know if I'm ready to walk away from everything we have. I'm so confused, Tom." "Confused?" She was confused? That made one of us. For me, everything was crystal clear. My wife had cheated on me, and now she was waffling between staying with me, the guy who apparently wasn't good enough, and running off with Jake, Mr. Finance Guy, who could buy her the life she thought she deserved. "I need you to leave," I said abruptly, standing up from the table. I couldn't sit there and look at her anymore. I couldn't pretend that this was some problem we could talk through and fix. Not tonight. Sarah blinked in surprise. "Tom, please, let's talk about this." "There's nothing left to talk about tonight," I said firmly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need time to think. And I can't do that with you here." She looked like she wanted to argue, but after a moment, she nodded and stood up from the table. "I'll stay at my sister's tonight," she said quietly. I didn't respond. I couldn't. All I could do was watch as she grabbed her purse, slipped on her shoes, and walked out the door. The sound of the door clicking shut behind her felt like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. For the first time in my life, I felt completely and utterly alone. I don't know how long I sat there after Sarah left. Time seemed to blur together, and all I could do was replay the conversation over and over in my head, trying to figure out where everything had gone so wrong. Was it really about the money? Had I been so wrapped up in trying to make ends meet that I'd missed all the signs that my marriage was falling apart? Or was this just who Sarah had been all along? Someone who wanted more than I could give? Someone who was always going to leave the moment something better came along? I tried to tell myself that it wasn't my fault. I'd done everything I could to provide for us. I'd worked hard, tried to save money, and even picked up extra tutoring gigs on the side to give us a little more breathing room financially. But none of that seemed to matter to her. It was never enough. I was never enough. As the hours dragged on, I found myself wandering through our house, looking at all the little things that used to make me feel happy and secure. The framed wedding photo on the mantle, the souvenirs from trips we'd taken together, the notes she used to leave me on the kitchen counter before work. All of it felt like a lie now. Every memory was tainted by the knowledge that while I'd been pouring my heart into our marriage, she'd been out with someone else. Eventually, I ended up in the bedroom. Our bed, our shared bed, felt like a monument to her betrayal. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in it, not after everything I just learned. Instead, I grabbed a blanket and crashed on the couch, hoping that maybe, just maybe, a night of sleep would help me make sense of the chaos in my mind. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face, heard her voice saying those awful words, "I've been seeing someone else." It was like a nightmare I couldn't escape, no matter how hard I tried. At some point in the early hours of the morning, my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, assuming it was just a random notification. But when it buzzed again a few minutes later, I reluctantly picked it up, squinting at the screen in the dim light of the living room. It was Sarah. She'd sent me a text. "I'm sorry," it read. "I didn't mean to hurt you like this. I don't know what to do." I stared at the message for a long time, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to reply, to ask her how she could have done this to us, to beg her to come home and make things right. But another part of me, an angrier, more wounded part, wanted to block her number and never speak to her again. In the end, I didn't reply. I couldn't. There were no words that could fix this, no quick answers that would make the pain go away. All I knew was that everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days passed in a haze. I barely left the house. I didn't go to work, didn't answer any calls or texts from friends. I couldn't face them, not after what had happened. What was I supposed to say? That my wife had cheated on me because I didn't make enough money? That after 6 years of marriage, she decided I wasn't good enough for her anymore? It was humiliating. I spent most of my time just trying to wrap my head around it. I replayed every conversation, every argument, every moment from the past year, wondering if I had missed something obvious. Maybe I had been too focused on making ends meet. Maybe I should have worked harder, taken on a second job, or found a better paying gig. But no matter how much I tried to reason it out, I kept coming back to the same question. Was this really about money, or was it something deeper? I didn't know what to do, so I did what any heartbroken, confused person might do. I spent hours on the internet, reading through forums, advice columns, and articles about infidelity. I needed to understand. I needed to know if this kind of thing happened to other people, if other marriages fell apart over something as seemingly shallow as money. What I found wasn't reassuring. Stories like mine were everywhere. People who had been cheated on, betrayed, left behind by the person they loved because life hadn't turned out the way they'd expected. It didn't make me feel any better, but at least I wasn't alone. On the third day, I finally broke down and called my best friend, Jason. We'd known each other since college, and he'd been the best man at our wedding. If there was anyone I could talk to about this, it was him. "Tom, man, you've been A for days," he said as soon as he picked up the phone. "What's going on?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to even start. But then the words just spilled out. I told him everything, about Sarah's confession, about how she'd been seeing this guy Jake for 6 months, about how it all came crashing down on our anniversary. I expected him to be shocked, maybe even a little speechless, but Jason's reaction was immediate. "That's messed up, dude. I can't believe she did that to you." "Yeah," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "Tell me about it." For a few moments, neither of us spoke. I could tell Jason was trying to figure out what to say next, but there was no easy fix for this. No magic words that would make it better. "So, what are you going to do?" he finally asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "She left the other night and went to stay with her sister. We haven't really talked since." "Do you even want to talk to her?" he asked bluntly. "Because, man, if it were me, I don't think I'd be able to forgive that. She cheated on you for months. That's not just a one-time mistake. That's a choice she made over and over again." His words hit me hard, but I knew he was right. This wasn't some drunken one-night stand she'd regretted. This was an affair. She'd gone out with him, spent time with him, shared things with him that she should have only shared with me. And all while pretending to be my wife, pretending that our life together was still real. "I don't know if I can forgive her," I said honestly. "But I don't know if I'm ready to throw away 6 years of marriage either." Jason sighed. "I get it, man. But you've got to think about yourself here. She wasn't thinking about you when she did this. She was only thinking about herself. That was the harsh reality of it, wasn't it? Sarah had been thinking about what she wanted, what she needed, without any regard for how it would destroy me. It felt selfish, and that made it all the harder to consider any kind of reconciliation. How do you rebuild trust with someone who's so willing to throw it away? "I think you need to talk to her," Jason continued. "Get some answers. Figure out where her head's at, because you deserve to know the truth. And if she's not all in on fixing things, then maybe it's time to move on." I knew he was right. As much as it hurt, I needed to confront Sarah again. I couldn't just sit around and let this uncertainty consume me. I needed to know if there was anything left to salvage, or if I was just holding on to a fantasy that didn't exist anymore. That evening, I sent Sarah a text. "We need to talk. Can you come over tomorrow?" Her response came quickly, "Yes. I'll be there." The next day felt like it lasted an eternity. I spent most of it pacing around the house, trying to mentally prepare myself for the conversation. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to let out all the anger and frustration I'd been holding in since she dropped her bombshell. But another part of me just wanted answers. I needed to know why. Why had she done this? Why wasn't I enough? By the time Sarah arrived, my nerves were shot. She walked through the door looking hesitant, like she wasn't sure what kind of reception she was going to get. I didn't say anything at first, just gestured for her to sit down at the kitchen table where we'd had so many other conversations over the years. Only this time, it felt like a battle line had been drawn between us. "I'm sorry, Tom," she said as soon as she sat down, her voice soft and full of regret. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've messed up." I didn't respond right away. I was tired of hearing apologies that didn't change anything. "Why did you do it?" I finally asked, cutting straight to the point. "I need to know why." She looked down at her hands, her fingers nervously playing with the hem of her shirt. "I don't know if there's just one reason," she said quietly. "I was unhappy and I guess I let that unhappiness lead me down a path I shouldn't have gone down." "Unhappy with what?" I pressed. "With me? With our marriage? With everything," she admitted. I felt like we were stuck, like we weren't moving forward. I watched my friends get promotions, buy nicer homes, go on vacations, and it made me realize how much I wanted that too. And when Jake came along, he offered me a glimpse of that life. I know it was selfish, but I felt like I deserved more than what we had. Her words cut through me like a knife. "So you decided to throw away our marriage for more money? For a lifestyle?" She flinched, but she didn't deny it. "I know it sounds shallow, and maybe it is, but it wasn't just about the money. Jake made me feel alive, like I was worth something. I guess I didn't feel that way with you anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You didn't feel worth something with me? Sarah, I've done everything I could to support us. I've worked hard. I've loved you. What else was I supposed to do?" She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know. I don't know what you could have done differently. I'm not trying to make excuses. I know I messed up, but I was lost, Tom. I felt like I was drowning, and Jake was the lifeline I grabbed onto. I felt sick. All those nights I'd spent thinking I was doing enough, trying to make her happy, and it had never been enough. Nothing I did could compete with the allure of a life she thought she deserved. So what now?" I asked, my voice low and tired. "Are you staying with him? Is that what you want?" Sarah wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. "No. I ended it with Jake. It wasn't real. I know that now. I don't know if we can come back from this." I didn't know either. The betrayal felt too deep, too raw. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the years we'd spent together, the memories we'd made. Was I really ready to throw it all away? Or was there a part of me that still believed we could fix this? I stared at Sarah, trying to comprehend everything she just said. Her tears were real, her regret palpable, but the damage was done. The weight of her betrayal felt like a mountain pressing down on me, and I didn't know if I could lift it. After everything she'd admitted, could we really come back from this? "I ended it with Jake," she repeated, as if that was supposed to make things better. But all I could think about was that she had started it in the first place. She had chosen to be with him, over me, for months. Her choice to stop now didn't undo the months of lies, deceit, and betrayal. "I don't know what you expect me to say," I muttered, leaning back in my chair, exhausted. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just numb. "I don't expect you to say anything," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted you to know the truth. I thought you deserved that much." "Deserved that much?" I scoffed, shaking my head. "Sarah, I deserved more than this. I deserved a wife who didn't turn her back on me when things got hard. I deserved a partner, not someone who runs to another man when she's not getting what she wants." She winced at my words, but I didn't care. This was the reality of what she had done, and she needed to hear it. "I know," she said softly. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I don't want to lose you, Tom. I want to try to fix this." Her words hung in the air, but they felt hollow to me. How do you fix something that's shattered beyond repair? How do you rebuild trust when it's been destroyed so completely? I let out a long breath, running my hands over my face. "Sarah, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can just pretend like everything's okay. You cheated on me for 6 months. How am I supposed to trust you again? How am I supposed to move past that?" She didn't have an answer, and I didn't expect her to. The silence between us was thick and suffocating. It was like we were standing on opposite sides of a canyon, both of us too scared to take the first step toward the other. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right now," she finally said, her voice trembling. I need you to give me a chance to prove that I'm sorry. To prove that I want to make this right." I stared at her, my mind racing. Could I give her that chance? Was I even capable of trying to rebuild this marriage after everything that had happened? The truth was, I didn't know. Part of me wanted to throw her out, to tell her that she'd made her choice and now she had to live with it. But another part of me, an embarrassingly vulnerable part, didn't want to lose her. Despite everything, I still loved her. I hated that I did, but I couldn't just turn off 6 years of marriage like flipping a switch. "Do you really think we can fix this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I think we can. But only if we both want to." That was the problem. I didn't know if I wanted to. I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. Every time I looked at her now, all I saw was the image of her with Jake, of her choosing him over me. How do you erase that? "I need time," I finally said, my voice shaky. "I can't make any decisions right now." Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with tears again. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be at my sister's if you want to talk." With that, she stood up and left, quietly closing the door behind her. As soon as she was gone, the silence of the house enveloped me, and I was left alone with my thoughts, my confusion, and the emptiness of what used to be our life together. The days that followed were some of the loneliest I'd ever experienced. I wasn't sure if it was because Sarah was gone, or if it was the realization that my marriage might be over, but everything felt surreal. I went through the motions, work, grocery shopping, coming home to an empty house, but it was like I was just a shadow of myself. I talked to Jason a few times during that period. He'd check in, make sure I wasn't spiraling, but even he didn't know what advice to give anymore. The truth was, no one could make this decision for me. It was my life, my marriage, and I had to figure out what the hell I wanted. It wasn't until about a week later that I finally saw Sarah again. She asked to come over so we could talk, and though I wasn't sure what good it would do, I agreed. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd confessed her affair, and it felt like we were both walking on eggshells. "Have you thought about what you want?" she asked, her voice soft, almost timid. "I've thought about nothing else," I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck. "But I still don't know, Sarah. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I want to." Her face fell, and I could see the pain in her eyes, but I wasn't going to sugarcoat things. This wasn't just some minor bump in the road. This was a betrayal of everything our marriage had been built on. "I'm willing to go to counseling," she offered. "Couples therapy, individual therapy, whatever it takes. I'll do anything, Tom. I know I hurt you, but I'm willing to fight for us." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she was truly sorry and that she was willing to do the hard work to fix things. But even if she was, could I do it? Could I sit in therapy sessions and talk about her affair, relive the betrayal over and over again, just to maybe find some path to healing? "I don't know if I can do that," I said honestly. "It's not just about you, Sarah. It's about me. Every time I think about what you did, it feels like a punch to the gut. I don't know how to move past that." She nodded, tears welling up again. "I get it. I do. But I'm asking you to at least try. If not for me, then for everything we've built together. We've been through so much, Tom. Don't let this be the thing that tears us apart." It was a desperate plea, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. But the problem was, I didn't know if I had anything left to give. I was exhausted, emotionally, mentally, physically. I'd spent years trying to make our life work, trying to be enough for her, and it had all blown up in my face. Was I really supposed to put myself through more pain to try and salvage something that might already be dead? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I knew I had to make a decision soon. I couldn't live in this limbo forever, and neither could Sarah. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't see a clear path forward. On one hand, there was a part of me that wanted to fight for our marriage. We'd been together for so long, and I couldn't just erase the good times we'd had. But on the other hand, the pain of her betrayal was too fresh, too raw, and I wasn't sure if I could ever truly forgive her for what she'd done. The next morning, I woke up feeling more conflicted than ever. I knew I had to talk to Sarah again, but this time, I needed to be honest, not just with her, but with myself. I couldn't keep pretending like I could figure this out on my own. I needed clarity. I needed to know if there was anything left to save, or if we were just prolonging the inevitable. Later that day, I called Sarah and asked her to meet me at a coffee shop nearby. I figured it would be better to talk in a neutral place, somewhere that didn't have the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. When she arrived, I could see the anxiety written all over her face. She sat down across from me, and for a few moments, we just sat there in silence, the noise of the coffee shop buzzing around us. "I've been thinking a lot," I finally said, breaking the silence. "And I think we need to be honest with each other about where we go from here." She nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Okay. I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice low. "I don't know if I can get past what you did. But I also don't know if I'm ready to walk away." Sarah bit her lip, her eyes brimming with tears again. "I don't want to walk away. I want to fight for us, Tom. But I need to know if you're willing to try." I hesitated, my mind racing. Was I willing to try? Was there any part of me that still believed in our marriage, in the life we'd built together? Or was I just holding on out of fear? Fear of being alone? Fear of starting over? "I think I owe it to myself to try," I finally said. "But I need you to understand something. This isn't going to be easy. I'm not going to just forgive you overnight. It's going to take time and a lot of work." Sarah nodded, wiping away a tear. "I understand. And I'm ready to do whatever it takes." We sat in that coffee shop for a long time, not saying much after I told her I was willing to try. The decision didn't feel triumphant, like I'd imagined it would. It felt more like the starting line of a marathon I wasn't sure I had the strength to run. But I had made my choice, and now we had to face whatever came next. In the days that followed, Sarah moved back into the house. It was awkward at first, everything between us was fragile, and every interaction felt like stepping on thin ice. But we were trying at least. We both knew that nothing would magically fix itself overnight. One of the first things we did was start couples counseling. I wasn't sure what to expect going into it, and honestly, I wasn't convinced it would help. But Sarah had insisted, and I figured if we were really going to give this a shot, we had to be all in. The therapist, Dr. Evans, was a soft-spoken woman in her mid-50s. She listened more than she spoke, which, at first, was frustrating. But as the sessions progressed, I began to understand why. She wasn't there to give us all the answers. She was there to help us find them ourselves. "I understand that you're feeling betrayed, Tom," she said during one of our early sessions. "That's completely natural, and it's important that we acknowledge those feelings. But moving forward, we also have to explore why this happened in the first place." "Why this happened?" I repeated, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "It happened because Sarah decided to cheat on me. What else is there to explore?" Dr. Evans nodded, her expression calm. "I know it feels that simple, but affairs are often the result of deeper issues in a relationship. It doesn't excuse what Sarah did, but if we're going to work on rebuilding trust, we need to understand what led to the breakdown in your marriage." I sat back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest. I hated that she was right. I wanted to believe that this was all Sarah's fault, that her betrayal was the only thing that had gone wrong. But deep down, I knew that wasn't entirely true. Our marriage had been struggling long before she cheated. Sarah looked down at her lap, her voice quiet. I felt like I was suffocating. I know that sounds selfish, but I did. We were always fighting about money, about the future, and I felt like we were stuck. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions in check. "So, your solution was to have an affair?" "No," she said quickly. "It wasn't a solution. It was a mistake, a huge one. But I wasn't thinking clearly. I was frustrated and Jake was he made me feel wanted at a time when I felt invisible." Her words hit me hard, and I could feel the sting of them deep in my chest. Invisible. I'd been working myself to the bone trying to keep us afloat, and the whole time, she'd felt like I wasn't even there. "I didn't want to feel invisible," I said slowly, my voice thick with emotion. "I was trying to fix things. I was trying to make our lives better." "I know," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "And I'm so sorry that I didn't see that at the time. I was selfish and I was wrong. I should have talked to you instead of running to someone else." The session ended with both of us emotionally drained, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were finally starting to address the real issues between us. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about everything that had led up to it. The financial stress, the lack of communication, the growing resentment we'd both been harboring. As the weeks went by, counseling became a regular part of our routine. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of days when I wanted to throw in the towel. There were moments when the anger would flare up again, when I'd think about Jake and how Sarah had chosen him over me. But slowly I started to see a shift in both of us. We were talking more, really talking, not just arguing or throwing blame around. We were starting to reconnect little by little. But even as things improved, I knew that forgiveness was a long way off. The trust that had been shattered wasn't something that could be repaired with a few therapy sessions. It would take time, maybe even years, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever fully get there. But I was willing to try, and that had to count for something. One night, about 6 months after Sarah had first confessed to the affair, we were sitting on the couch together. It was one of the few quiet evenings we'd had in a long time. No heavy conversations, no counseling sessions, just the two of us, watching a movie like we used to. Halfway through the film, Sarah reached over and took my hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it meant more to me than I could put into words. I glanced over at her, and for the first time in months, I didn't see the woman who had betrayed me. I saw my wife, the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. The woman I still loved, despite everything. "I'm really glad you're here," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm so grateful that you gave us another chance." I squeezed her hand, my throat tightening. "I'm glad I'm here too," I admitted. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. It wasn't a perfect moment. It wasn't like the movies, where everything falls into place and the past is magically erased. But it was real. It was messy and complicated, but it was ours. A year after Sarah's confession, we were still in therapy. Some weeks were better than others, and there were still times when I'd wake up in the middle of the night, the old feelings of anger and betrayal creeping back in. But they were fewer and farther between now. We'd made a commitment to each other, a commitment to rebuild our marriage from the ground up. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I questioned whether it was worth it. But every time I looked at Sarah, every time I saw the genuine remorse in her eyes, I knew that walking away would have been the easier choice. Staying and fighting for our marriage was harder, but it was worth it. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, I looked across the table at Sarah and smiled. It was a small moment, one that wouldn't have meant much to anyone else, but to me, it was everything. We'd been through hell, but we were still here. And that was enough for now. I'm not sure where we'll go from here. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive her, or if the scars of her betrayal will fade completely. But I do know that we're stronger now, stronger than we were before, stronger than I ever thought we could be. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. If you like such stories, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. It will be the biggest support for me.